Nature's boundaries are meant to be crooked. A river does not apologize for wandering. A deer trail doesn't seek permission before it curves. Even a fallen tree, if it's left long enough, becomes a soft boundary the forest will negotiate around. Straight lines are different. Straight lines are what people bring into the woods when they want the woods to behave. Fence posts, survey stakes, property corners hammered into stone, a bright ribbon of tape tied to a branch. A straight line says, that is your side, this is mine. The forest has its own way of dividing what should touch and what shouldn't. It doesn't always use a river, a mountain range, or a clearing. Sometimes it uses absence. Welcome to the Night Skald. Tonight's account comes from Ranger Riley, an old family friend who filed his official reports on paper and spilled the unofficial after a good dry rye. His telling was always somewhere between recounting facts and trying to make sense of them all. More talking to himself than to me. This incident starts with a routine boundary patrol, a radio that didn't die so much as go mute, and a compass that lost its way. If you ever find a place where the world goes all quiet at once, don't try to fill it with your own voice. I filed this telling under Ranger Riley files. The silence line. The narration is in first person from Ranger Riley's point of view. Day 1, October 14th, 1622 hours. The northern boundary sector, compartments N7 through N9. Clear skies with a light wind from the west. Temperature falling. It last rained 3 days ago. My purpose was a boundary survey with a GPS correction for an old fire road and a signage check along a private timber line. I'm writing this the way I should have written it the first time. Officially, this was an acoustic anomaly on a possible equipment malfunction. That's the kind of language that keeps the supervisors calm, jobs kept, and budgets intact. Unofficially, I stepped into a place where the forest didn't want to be heard or found. I'd been walking the northern ridge most of the afternoon, doing the kind of work nobody tells stories about. You follow old cuts and forgotten roads until they stop being roads and turn back into forest. You look for signs nailed too low, blazes grown over, corners that drift because someone on the private side figures that trees won't complain if they take an extra 15 feet. It was October. The kind of late afternoon where the light turns honey gold and makes the pine needles look like they're lit from the inside. Hemlock shadows long a cool, pine sap in the air, a woodpecker working somewhere upslope just as steady as a metronome. I remember thinking, plain as anything, that the day had been cooperative. Cooperative, that word lingers in my thoughts. The forest is never friendly, but it often cooperates. I had my handheld GPS in one hand and my radio clipped high on my shoulder strap. Dispatch had asked for an update on the old fire road coordinates. There had been a complaint about a missing marker, which usually means somebody wants it missing. I keyed the mic and started to talk. North Sector Boundary Patrol, Riley, I'm it. And then my radio stopped. Not static, not a fade, not a crackle, just nothing. The sentence didn't cut off like something had interfered. It cut off like the world had decided that sentence wasn't allowed. I let go of the button and looked at the radio like it had betrayed me. Battery indicator showed full. No visible damage, no loose cable, no wet, no mud. It was just dead in the cleanest way possible. I tapped it, twisted the volume knob, checked the squelch. Nothing. I turned my head, expecting to hear wind in the canopy, the knocking of the woodpecker, the distant creek bubbling, and my own gears shifting. I heard none of it. Not quiet, not like the birds had paused. I mean nothing. Dead silence. When a forest goes quiet, you notice it in the way that you notice an otherwise busy room going quiet when you walk into it. It's not so much the absence, it's the attention. I stood there and listened hard enough to make my ears ache. No wind overhead, no insects, no rustle of leaves when I shifted my boot. I lifted my foot and set it down slowly, deliberately, and felt the gravel grind underneath my sole, but I couldn't hear it. I opened my mouth and said, "Hello," to no one, just to see if the air would carry anything at all. It felt like speaking underwater. My voice was inside my skull, thick and private. The air in front of me didn't seem to accept it. I swallowed. I felt it, but didn't hear it. That's the thing that people don't understand about silence. It's not just what you can't hear. It's about what you should be hearing. The forest has a baseline, even in winter, even when it's snowing. There's always a little movement, always a little bit of life making itself known. This was not winter quiet. This was not snow quiet. This was total silence, like the vacuum of space where there's no air for sound vibrations to ride from the sender to the receiver. I looked down at my GPS. The screen was on, satellites locked. Everything seemed normal. I took one step backward, and the sounds of the world came rushing back. A crow somewhere far off, a small exhale of wind in the hemlocks, the faintest shiver of fall leaves. I took one step forward, and the veil of silence came down again. No crow, no wind, no leaves. I backed up 2 steps, and the sound returned. Forward 2 steps, and the sound vanished. I did it again, slower. 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, the same result. It was like I'd found the edge of an invisible room in the forest. I tied a strip of flagging tape to a branch at shoulder height. Nothing bright enough to be seen from any real distance, just enough to find the spot again if I came back. Then I walked perpendicular to the boundary of silence, east towards the private timber, while keeping my eyes on the tape marker. The edge didn't follow me. It stayed put. I took a step forward, crossing the boundary, and the silence took me. I took a step back, and the forest gave sound back as if it had been on a short leash. That's when it stopped being a spot and it became a line. The silence line. I walked north, straddled the line with one ear in sound and one ear in deathly silence. Every time my lead foot crossed the boundary, the world in front of me went dead. Every time I pulled back, the woods resumed breathing. I followed it for a good quarter mile. It did not bend. The forest on either side was normal. Trees, undergrowth, deadfall, the usual clutter of life and decay. But the line itself ran straight as if someone had snapped it with a chalk string from horizon to horizon. I pulled out my compass at the edge. The needle didn't spin wildly. It did something worse. It rotated slowly, like a tired thing looking for a place to rest and never quite found north. I stepped away, 2 yards back in the normal sound, and the needle snapped to attention. I stepped forward into the silence, and it began to drift again, slow and sure, as if north had become negotiable. I didn't like that. I took photographs with my phone and trail cam. In the phone's viewfinder, the trees on the silent side looked darker. Not shadowed, not underexposed. Older somehow. The bark was deeper grooved. Greens dulled towards black. The red, orange, and yellow colors of the fall maple leaves on the sound side were bright and inviting. On the silent side, they were muted and foreboding. Yet, it was subtle enough that you could dismiss it if you wanted to, but it was consistent enough that I stopped trying. I wrote notes in my field book as if I were writing a police incident report that might be read in court. Time, 1702. Observation, acoustic boundary, straight line. Bearing, north-south, approximately. Compensatory testing, back-forth steps, restore/remove ambient sound. Equipment, radio fails within boundary with full battery. Professional curiosity is a strong thing. It's a tool. It's how you keep from panicking when the world goes sideways. But there was another feeling growing underneath it now. Not fear, Not yet, anyways. A kind of appetite. Like the silence wasn't empty. Like it was waiting to be filled. I left when the light started to go thin. In my line of work, you learn early not to negotiate with new weirdness at dusk. Dusk is when your eyes lie and your nerves overreact. I told myself to come back with better gear, better light, and a second set of eyes. On the walk back to my truck, I realized something that I didn't want to admit. I'd been holding my breath. Not the whole time, mind you, but in stretches, without noticing it. Like my mind thought my breathing was drowning out the silence, so my body tried to be quiet. When I reached the road and climbed into the truck, the sound of the door closing startled me. It was loud. Too loud. I sat there with my hands on the wheel and listened to the engine fire and idle, grateful for the ugly proof that I still existed in a world where things made noise. I keyed my radio. There was static. It seemed delayed, like it had to travel through something thick to reach me. Then dispatch, irritated, "Riley, say again?" I hadn't said anything. I told them I had equipment trouble and I was heading in. That was the first lie. I wrote my preliminary report at the station, under fluorescent lights that make everything look tired. Acoustic anomaly along northern boundary. Suspected equipment malfunction due to localized interference. Radio non-functional within affected area. Recommend follow-up survey with secondary equipment. It was careful language, the kind of language that keeps you from being sent to occupational health for a review. I didn't write, "There's a line in the woods where the sound ends." I didn't write, "The sound feels like it's territorial." I didn't write, "When I stood inside it, I couldn't hear my own heartbeat or breathing." That last part was the one I kept thinking about. When the world gets quiet enough, you hear yourself. Blood pulsing in your ears. Heart thumping. Breathing. The small mechanics of being alive. Inside that silence, I had none of that. No internal tics. No proof that I was alive. Just internal pressure and the feeling that the forest had taken my sound, the way a person picks up a smartphone, casual and unhurried because it belongs to them. I slept poorly that night. I dreamed of standing in perfect quiet while the world around me screamed. No sound, just the shape of screaming in the air. Day 2. I went back the next afternoon with better equipment. A handheld GPS, fresh batteries, a field recorder, a simple sound meter I borrowed from maintenance, a second radio, and a little more hubris than I should have carried. I also called Marcus. Marcus is a geologist who assisted me with research and rescue on occasion. The last time there were 2 hikers, one broken ankle and one very poor decision. Marcus had been the one to identify the quickest route off the ridge without putting the helicopter into a bad canyon wind. He's a practical man. He believes in rock, water, pressure, and time. He does not believe in weird, which is why I wanted him there. Although I didn't tell him exactly why, just that I wanted his opinion about something I'd found. When pressed for more details, I said, "You'll see. I don't want to influence your opinion." On the hike in, he talked about typical geologist things. Rock layers, old river cuts, the way the private timberland liked to pretend it didn't seep into the forest like a bad stain. The forest sounded normal. That normal sound made me tense in a way I didn't expect. I felt like we were walking towards a room where the world would suddenly stop. When we reached my flagging tape marker, Marcus slowed. He didn't step forward into it. He didn't need to. His face changed in a small way, like he'd smelled something faint but wrong. "What is it?" he asked. "Watch," I said. I took 3 steps forward. The hood came down around me. I turned towards Marcus and clapped my hands together. It should have been loud, but it was silent. I took 3 steps back out and clapped them again, with the expected result. Marcus blinked once, hard. "Is that some sort of a trick?" he said, shakenly. "Now you do it," I told him. He shook his head without looking away from the edge. No. Why? He swallowed. This place feels like water pressing on your eardrums from the inside out. His description was close enough to what I'd felt the day before that I got goosebumps on my arm. I stepped back in. I held the sound meter at the edge. It read a clean 0.0 for a moment, then flickered and threw an error. Not proof, just wrong. I tried to record my voice on the handheld recorder. I said, field note, boundary condition observed. Time, 16:33. I stepped back out. When I played it back, the screen showed a file. The file played, but there was no sound. Not even a hiss. Just felt emptiness that made my stomach turn. Marcus looked at the recorder, then at me. Could be equipment, he said, but it sounded like a prayer that you don't expect to work. Let's map it, I said. He hesitated. Then he nodded once. 2 miles, he said. Then I'm done. The line crossed a creek bed about half a mile north of my marker. In the normal woods, you hear a creek before you see it. Water talking to stone, little collisions and slips and whispers, the bubbling and gurgling. We heard none of that. And then we saw it. Water moving, surface broken, current bending around rocks, visually alive, but it made no sound. It looked like watching a film with the audio off, like your brain kept expecting the world to match the visual, but it didn't. Marcus stood at the edge and stared long. He picked up a stick and dipped it into the flow of the silent side. The stick moved through the water. The water moved around the stick. A visual splash, but not an audible one. He pulled the stick out, and a bead of water clung to the tip, perfect and silent, and then fell back into the creek as if it had dropped into soft cotton. Marcus stepped back fast like he touched something hot. No, he said quietly. Then, shaking his head, he loudly said, Nope. 2 miles, I reminded him. He looked at me like I was doing something wrong. You're going to walk this thing, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to understand it, I said. Marcus's expression tightened. That's the kind of thing that gets you killed, he said. People have died trying to understand the weird ways of the forest. We mapped the line with GPS waypoints every quarter mile. It cut through ravines, over ridges, through thick understory and open stands. It ignored the terrain as if it were a mere suggestion, a straight line that didn't care what it crossed. I kept expecting it to drift, to follow a feature, to make sense as a human boundary, but it didn't. At the 2-mile mark, Marcus stopped. He looked at the forest on the silent side, then at me. I'm done, he said. You didn't even step in, I said, and I regretted it as soon as the words left my mouth. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's exactly why I'll stay alive in the real world, he said with irritation. He hurriedly handed me the sound meter. This is not rock, he quipped. This is not water. This is not a fault line. This pressure is unnatural. This is some sort of a boundary. He paused, took a deep breath, and quietly added, and it feels like it belongs to something that doesn't want us to find it. He quickly beat feet out of the area. I watched him go until his footfalls disappeared. Then I stood at the edge of the silence and listened to it take everything away. Day 3. The next morning, I went to a place I don't always like visiting. Not because it's dangerous, it just gives me the willies. There's a county historical building 2 towns over with a back room that smells like paper that's been breathing dust for 100 years. The public part has glass cases and friendly plaques. The back room was filled with cabinets and maps that aren't meant to be touched. I call the old caretaker who watches over it the archivist. She has a way of looking at you like she's already filed you away. Not rude, but not kind. Always on point, always accurate. I've talked about her before. Not often. She isn't someone you go to unless you're ready to hear the version of history that doesn't fit in the textbook. She listened while I explained, careful not to sound like a man telling ghost stories. I said boundary survey. I said straight line. I said radial failure. I said no ambient sound. I did not say hungry. She didn't interrupt. She didn't raise an eyebrow. She didn't do any of the things that people do when they want you to know they doubt you. When I finished, she opened a drawer and slid out an old map like she'd been waiting for this time to come. The paper was thick and tired. The ink had gone soft on the edges. She pointed with a pencil. Red Creek Mining Company, she said. 1892. There was a neat notation along a straight boundary. Disputed line. A claim line. A human attempt at ownership. I felt my throat go tight. It's the same, I said. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just reached into another drawer. A newspaper clipping, yellowed and delicate, tucked into a sleeve. The headline was small, the kind of small that tells you that the world didn't stop for it. It read, Miners Vanish. 7 men from Red Creek operation failed to return from survey work. Sheriff reports finding survey equipment abandoned at North Boundary. No signs of struggle. Investigation ongoing. No conclusion, no bodies. Just an unfinished sentence on paper. She flipped the sleeve and showed me a note in a cramped handwriting. It might have been from a later file, maybe from someone who tried to follow up. One widow reported her husband's last words, she said, reading without emphasis. The woods won't let us mark it. I stared at that line until the words stopped being words and became a feeling. The archivist closed the sleeve and looked at me. Are you planning to mark it? She asked. I hesitated while absent-mindedly rubbing my chin through my beard with one hand. An old habit that appears when I'm deep in thought. In my head, I saw my flagging tape, my GPS waypoints, my notes, all the neat little human tricks we use to make the world obey. I'm planning to understand it, I said. Her gaze didn't change, but her head tipped back as if to say, uh-huh, good luck with that. Either quiet disapproval or disbelief. You may need permission before you're allowed to understand it, she said. I shrugged my shoulders and raised an eyebrow. I didn't have an answer. She slid the map back into the drawer, but not before tracing the line again with her pencil. People love straight lines, she said, almost to herself. They think straight means safe. Then softer. Lines made by people are meant for people. Lines made by something else? That's harder to say. She handed me photocopies. Sanitized versions that didn't feel as alive as the originals. Take these, she said, and don't take anything else. Anything else? I asked. She paused. Paper is an invitation, she said. So is a name. Then she turned the desk lamp off like the conversation was filed. That night, I dreamt the line had moved. Not in the woods. In my house. A straight seam down the hallway where the air was thick and silent, and my bedroom door wouldn't open because the knob made no sound when I turned it. I woke with my heart pounding, and for a moment I couldn't hear it. Then the furnace clicked on, and the world remembered itself. I lay there in the dark and listened to the normal house hum like it was proof. And I knew that I was going back. Not because I wanted to, because the silence had started to feel like a question I couldn't stop hearing. Day 4. The next morning, Marcus didn't answer my call. Good for him. I went alone. 1 mile north of my first marker, I saw something that made my mouth go dry. An iron stake, driven in the stone. Not a park marker, not a modern fence post. It was a survey stake, old and purposeful. Rusted and furred with lichen, but still upright, still insisting on being counted. Nearby, half hidden under pine needles, was a leather case. I crouched and touched it with 2 fingers. The leather was stiff but intact. The buckle wasn't eaten through. It should have been rotted and crumbled. It felt saved. Inside was a folded map of oilcloth, a short chain, a compass with a glass face, and a small journal wrapped in waxed paper. The compass needle drifted in the same slow, lost in the woods way mine had. The journal had a name on the first page, written carefully. Thomas Webb, surveyor, Red Creek Mining Company. The entries were dated 1892. I read standing up because crouching felt like lowering myself into something. August 12th, 1892. We marked the first mile of the claim today. Old growth. The trees have the look of cathedrals, all pillars and shadow. There is an odd silence in this section. Miller says it's the way the ravine holds the wind. I think he's trying to convince himself of it. August 19. The silence follows the line that we cut. It's as if we are drawing it out with our work. My ears ache after a few hours. I find myself swallowing to clear them, though there's no change. August 24. Found stones placed in a pattern. Not ours. Not natural. Very old. The foreman says to ignore it and continue. He's paid to believe the world is simple. September 2. 3 of us heard it today, beyond the silence. A sound just outside of it, like breathing, like the forest breathing, but only when we stopped moving. I told myself it was wind I couldn't hear, that it's nonsense. I write it anyway because I'm afraid I'll forget the truth. September 7. The line we are marking is not ours. We are tracing something that already exists. The stakes do not claim it. The stakes only confess it. The next entry was scratched out hard enough that the paper was cut. Only a few words survived. September 9. It knows we're here. Won't let us leave with what we've seen. I closed the journal slowly. The forest on the silent side didn't move. But I felt watched in the way that you feel watched through a dark window. I followed the line. I found another stake half a mile north, then another, and another. Each one had something near it. Not always obvious, not always preserved, but present. A tin cup with a dent, a length of chain, a glove stiff with age, a pocket watch face down in pine needles. At the fourth stake, I found bones. Small animal bones arranged in a ring around the iron, like a deliberate thought. Not scattered, not dragged, placed. I touched one, carefully, with the tip of my knife. The bone shifted against another bone. I felt it. I couldn't hear it. That is when my curiosity finally began to crack. Because silence isn't just absence, it's an action. Something was taking the sound away on purpose. I sat down once, just once. I told myself it was for my knees, for my back, for the long walk. But I sat inside the boundary on the silent side, with my pack against a tree and the journal in my lap. The quiet pressed on my ears, not painful, just insistent. And then I heard it. Not with my ears at first, with my chest. A slow draw, a slow release, like air moving through massive bellows. Not wind, it was too rhythmic, too patient. Breathing. The breathing synced with my own. My inhale slowed without permission. My exhale lengthened. For just a moment, it was comforting in a way that it's comforting to float in water that holds you. Then it wasn't, because I realized my body was following something else's tempo. I stood up fast, dizzy, angrily. My watch said 5 minutes had passed. It felt like mere seconds. I backed out of the silence and waited for sound to return. It did, eventually, like the world remembered me in layers. Wind first, then insects, then distant birds. I walked back to my truck with a jaw clenched hard enough to ache. And the whole way I kept my mouth shut, because the archivist's words kept tapping in the inside of my skull. Paper is an invitation, so is a name. Day 7. I waited 2 days. Not because time made me braver, because I needed to decide whether I was the kind of man who could leave an unfinished thing alone. I went back with supplies for 2 days: a satellite phone, the recorder, extra batteries, and a rule list written on a scrap of paper. 1. No entering holes. 2. Turn back by 1400 no matter what. 3. Check the compass and watch every 100 yards. 4. If you feel the urge to sit down, don't. I crossed into the silence, and it took me faster than before, like it remembered my weight. The first mile looked normal enough, if you didn't stare too hard. Then the color began to go. Not like winter, not like frost, like the pigment was being drained. Bark faded towards ash gray. Leaves looked thin, almost translucent, like tissue paper was holding sunlight and didn't know what to do with it. The ground softened. My boots left impressions that didn't spring back. I knelt and pressed my palm into the soil. It felt spongy, like it was wet, but it wasn't. It was as if the earth had forgotten how to resist. I took photos every 100 yards. On the camera screen, the silent side looked sharper than the real life, as if the image had more patience than my eyes. My hand was in one shot, and it looked faint. Not invisible, just less resolved, like a man in a photograph taken through glass. I forced myself to keep walking. I kept the recorder running, not expecting anything to be picked up. I spoke into it occasionally, out of habit more than hope. Field note. Time 11:22. Visual change observed. Ground softness increasing. No ambient sound. I played back the last hour. This time my footsteps were there, faint as if recorded through a closed door. My breathing was there, but thinner, and beneath it, steady and patient, the breathing of the forest. Louder now. Not loud in volume, but loud in presence, as if whatever it belonged to had moved closer, or I had. And there was a sound on the recording that didn't belong to me. A whisper, not clear. The kind of thing that you only admit you heard after you listened 3 times and realized that you're holding your breath again. It didn't give me instructions. It didn't say turn back. It didn't say come closer. It said something like a sentence broken on the way through. Stop walking their line. I stared at the recorder until the screen blurred. There. Not mine, not yours. There. The word made my stomach drop in a slow, cold way, because it suggested ownership, and ownership was the whole problem. At around 6 miles, by my count, by my watch, and by the ache in my legs, the line led to a clearing. It didn't feel like a clearing made by fire or storm. It felt prepared. The trees around it stood too evenly spaced. The undergrowth was too sparse, as if something had kept it tidy over time. In the center was a depression in the earth, perfectly circular. Not a sinkhole, not a pond bed, not a burrow. A shallow bowl, like a thumbprint in clay. And from that bowl I felt the breathing. Not heard, felt. A slow pressure change, like air moving in and out of a space too large to imagine below. Around the depression, in a rough ring, were iron stakes. 6, 7, I couldn't tell. One was bent low. One might have been swallowed under leaves and pine needles. The count kept slipping in my head. Between the stakes were objects. Old objects. A pocket watch with a cracked face. A wedding ring on a length of string. Boots that had been worn and carefully placed side by side. A miner's pickaxe, handle polished with hands long gone. Then newer things. A park ranger's badge from the 1960s. Different design than mine. Older shield shape, dulled with age. A hiking pack from the 1980s, sun-faded, strapped stiff. A smartphone with the screen face down. No case, like it had been set there gently, not dropped. All arranged with care. Not trophies. Releases, maybe. My chest tightened. I tried to speak. My mouth moved. No sound came out. I tried again, louder, forcing air. Nothing. The silence didn't just take sound from the world, it took it from me. The pressure in my ears increased, and for a moment I had the wild thought if I opened my mouth wide enough, the quiet would pour out like blood. I backed away. The clearing didn't change, but I felt the breathing adjust, like something listened to my retreat. I turned around and walked back along the line. I tried to keep my steps even, tried to keep my mind in procedures. Check watch, check compass, check GPS. The GPS still read, the compass still drifted, the watch still moved. But each step felt thicker, like walking through air that had become water. I stumbled once, caught myself on a tree, and felt bark under my palm. I didn't hear my hand hit it. My mouth opened to curse, no sound. I kept walking. At some point, I can't say when, I reached into my pocket for my badge. I don't know why, habit maybe. A grounding thing, the small piece of brass and cloth that says that you belong to a system, not to the woods. My fingers found nothing. I stopped, heart pounding, silently, of course. I patted every pocket, checking back straps, looked down at the ground. No badge. A cold thought came with it, simple and cruel. You brought something in, something with your name on it, something that makes you official. I took 2 steps back towards the clearing without meaning to. The pressure in my ears increased immediately. The breathing below me seemed closer, not louder, closer. I froze. And in that frozen moment, I understood something without having to put words on it. Not a rule, not a bargain, a fact. Some places don't let you leave with everything you brought. I turned away and walked. I didn't go back for my badge. I didn't look for it. I kept moving until the silence began to loosen. Sound returned the way it always did, slow and in layers. First the wind, faint like a memory. Then the smallest insect buzz. Then a bird call, so distant it might have been my imagination. Then finally the ugly comfort of my own boots on gravel. And when I could hear again, I realized that my heartbeat was slower than it should have been. Not calm, aligned, as if my body had learned a tempo for something vast and patient beneath the ground. On the way out, I pulled down every strip of flagging tape I'd left. I found the first one and tore it off the branch with more force than necessary. I collected my markers. I erased my little human insistences. At one stake, Webb's first, I stopped and looked at the iron driven into the snow. I thought about 7 men in 1892 walking a line with tools and confidence, thinking they were marking a claim. I thought about what Webb wrote. The stakes only confess it. I whispered an apology, not to the forest, to the men who tried to warn somebody with paper and ink. Then I walked until the sound of my truck door closing made me flinch. I went back to the archivist with my photocopies and my notes. I didn't want to, but I did. She watched me lay the papers down. Her eyes flickered to my uniform chest where my badge should have been. She didn't ask. That was almost worse than asking. I found stakes, I said. She nodded once, like she filed that possibility already. A journal, I said. Her gaze sharpened. Did you bring it? No, I said quietly. I read it, and I left it. She paused, small but meaningful. Good, she said. I told her about the clearing in careful language. I told her about the ring of objects. I told her I couldn't speak. I did not tell her about the breathing matching my lungs. That part felt too intimate, like confessing a sin. When I finished, she slid my notes into a folder that didn't have a label. Not a public file, a private one. People think archives are for remembering, she said. Sometimes they're just for keeping. Keeping what? I asked. She looked at me, and for the first time there was something like pity in her eyes. Keeping the world from repeating itself, she said. And then she tapped the folder, and keeping paper from becoming an invitation. I swallowed. What do I do? I asked. She didn't answer the way that people answer when they want to be helpful. She answered the way the weather answers. You stop trying to market, she said, and you don't encourage anyone else to try. I nodded. And in that nod, I realized that my curiosity was gone. Not satisfied, just cured. Day 8. I filed my final report. Survey complete. No irregularities found. Boundary markers removed as unnecessary. I recommended that the area be designed unsuitable for development or recreation. I used language that makes bureaucrats nod and sign off. Unstable soil conditions, landslide risk, ecological sensitivity. I also requested a transfer to the Southern District. They approved it without argument. No one asked why my badge was missing, and I didn't volunteer it. Sometimes, late at night in the new district, I wake up and listen. The house has its normal hum. The refrigerator clicks. The furnace breathes. But in the thin gap between sounds, between one mechanical sigh and the next, I can still feel it. A slow rhythm, a patient inhale, a patient exhale. Not loud, not threatening, just present. Like the forest learned my tempo, or I learned its. I don't drink as much rye as I used to. I don't patrol the northern boundary anymore. And when I see survey tape on a branch bright and daring, I pull it down without thinking. Because I learned that straight lines in the woods don't always belong to people. Sometimes they're the forest way of saying, this is as far as you get to go. So ends Ranger Riley's story. We like to pretend boundaries are polite things. We like to draw them on maps. We measure them in feet and acres, meters and miles. We nail them to trees and call it order. But the oldest boundaries aren't lines you can see. They're lines you feel in your chest when you step too far. If you ever find a place where the audio tracks seem to be missing from the visuals all around you, don't name it, don't mark it, just back away. And if you notice something missing when you finally reach sound again, let it stay missing. Sleep well. I'm the Skald, and this has been the Night Skald. If you enjoy this sort of content, you know what to do.